The great Australian film The Castle from 1997 has probably one of the highest counts of one-liners to enter the vernacular of any Aussie film in history. Tell him he's dreaming, this is going straight to the pool room, how's the serenity, and it's just the vibe of the thing, have all amused us countless times over the years whenever occasions permitted. But there's one line from the film that is now making its way back into currency, so to speak. What is it with wogs and cash? There was a time when the obsessive use of cash in Australia was restricted to drug dealers and immigrants with an innate suspicion of government. Well, for obvious reasons, that suspicion of the increasingly nosy government is more commonplace in Australia these days. My next guest has written a piece about this in the Spectator Australia, in which she quotes a German economist describing cash as, quote, printed freedom, and says it will be the social war of this century. She might be right. At a time when governments are pushing to know more and more about us, cash enables us to carry on making commercial exchanges in relative privacy. Not because we're engaging in criminal transactions, but that perfectly ordinary transactions these days are starting to acquire, to coin a phrase, social discredit. This is the kind of discredit some politicians might one day use against us. Of course, big tech already knows more about us than we are comfortable with. There are two reasons for this. Firstly, data is money. According to AOL, a big American company that sells online advertising space, it's worth more than content. Publishers make more from customer data than they do from subscriptions and advertising, so they're particularly determined to get their hands on it. Everyone is. Secondly, governments are not in a rush to regulate these invasions of privacy, partly because they want a piece of the action too. To find out why, let's bring in Alexandra Marshall from the Spectator Australia. Alexandra, welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Firstly, can you explain what you mean by printed freedom?
So this line was actually used in annoyance by our little economist friend in Germany because they were trying to increase the power of the state, and they were complaining that cash is a form of liberty that gives citizens privacy from the government oversight over their interactions. Now, liberty and cash are fundamental principles of a free market economy, because once you no longer have access to cash, a government can control, first of all, whether you have access to money, and second of all, how you use that money. So an example I give people who are trying to understand why liberty and cash are so deeply entwined is in Rome you had the powerful families who had enough money to buy things like armies and treasuries, and they held power against the Roman state. But this is like the Roman state saying, hey, you can have your wealth, but we're going to keep it in the Senate treasury. And then you can understand why cash on condition is no longer any kind of freedom at all. And that's what's being offered to Australia and the rest of the Western world under this new digital identity system, where all of our transactions are meant to be electronic by 2030. And the government has stated explicitly that they want to insert themselves between every transaction in our economy and check whether you're allowed to actually make these transactions. Now, that is a big problem for a free society.